Hello and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Adnan Iqbal. I welcome all of you. And in this video, we are going to talk about the anatomy of the parasympathetic nervous system. So far we have discussed about the sympathetic nervous system, and we have discussed that the sympathetic nervous system is the part of the autonomic nervous system, which is being made by the thoracolumbar region of the spinal cord. Now we'll talk about the parasympathetic nervous system, and you know that the parasympathetic nervous system is the part of the autonomic nervous system, which is being made by the cranial nerves and the sacral region of the spinal cord. And you know that the cranial nerves are those nerves which are being coming out from the brain, and the sacral region of the spinal cord, the region from S2 to S4, they make the parasympathetic outflow, or the part of the parasympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system is being made by the cranial nerves from the brain and the sacral nerves from the spinal cord. So now we will try to understand how the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, what is the outflow of the parasympathetic nervous system, how the parasympathetic nervous system produce its response. So for the simplicity, this is the brain, this is the brain stem of the brain, and below the brain stem we have the spinal cord. So in the case of the sympathetic nervous system, we have already discussed how the sympathetic nervous system is being activated. And so in the case of the parasympathetic nervous system, you know that in the brain we have the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus has two divisions. One is the parasympathetic division and the other is the sympathetic division. So in the case of the parasympathetic nervous system, for example, if you are sitting comfortably and you're not experiencing any anxiety, so in that case your parasympathetic division of the hypothalamus will be activated. So the parasympathetic division, upon activation, will send signal by the polysynaptic neurons to some nucleus which are present in the brainstem. So these four nucleus in the brainstem, they are being activated by the parasympathetic division, and you know that the nucleus in the central nervous system is the combination or the cluster of many neuronal cell bodies. So these four nucleus in the brain, these are the cluster or combination of many neuronal cell bodies, and from these cell bodies of the neuron, their long axons will come out, and you know that many long axons, the combination of many axons will form the nerve. So as these nerves are being coming out from the brain, so therefore we call these nerves as a cranial nerve. So these are the cranial nerves which are coming out from the brain, and their nucleus are known as the cranial nerve nucleus. So as there are four cranial nerve nucleus, so it means that the parasympathetic division is activating only four cranial nerve nucleus or four cranial nerves in the brain. But you know that we have 12 cranial nerves in the brain. So, but not all 12 cranial nerves are activated by the parasympathetic division. Only four cranial nerves are being activated by the parasympathetic division, and these four cranial nerves are cranial nerve 3, cranial nerve 7, cranial nerve 9, and cranial nerve 10. So in other words, we can say that the parasympathetic division is only activating those cranial nerves which have the parasympathetic fibers, and only four cranial nerves have the parasympathetic fibers, which are cranial nerve 3, 7, 9, and 10, and remaining all other cranial nerves do not have any parasympathetic fibers. So therefore these cranial nerves are not being activated by the parasympathetic division. So let's talk in detail about the parasympathetic nervous system outflow in the cranial part. So in the brain stem of the brain, uh, the four cranial nerve nucleus are being activated by the parasympathetic division activation, and this is the brain stem of the brain. And you know that the brain stem of the brain is being made by the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. So these four cranial nerve nucleus are being residing in the brainstem of the brain, and they are being activated by the parasympathetic division. So four cranial nerve nucleus or the four cranial nerves are being activated, and these four cranial nerves are the cranial nerve 3, cranial nerve 7, and cranial nerve 9, and cranial nerve 10. So cranial nerve 3 is also being known as the oculomotor nerve. Cranial nerve 7 is known as the facial nerve. Cranial nerve 9 is being known as the glossopharyngeal nerve, and cranial nerve 10 is being known as the vagus nerve. So the first one is the cranial nerve 3 or the oculomotor nerve. So the oculomotor nerve nucleus, the oculomotor nerve with a parasympathetic fiber, its nucleus is being residing in the midbrain, and its nucleus is known as the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. So the Edinger-Westphal nucleus is the oculomotor nerve nucleus with the parasympathetic fiber. Similarly, the facial nerve with the parasympathetic fiber, its nucleus is known as the superior salivatory nucleus, and the superior salivatory nucleus is being residing in the pons of the brainstem. Similarly, the glossopharyngeal nerve with the parasympathetic fiber, its nucleus is being residing in the medulla, and its nucleus is known as the inferior salivatory nucleus. And the vagus nerves with the parasympathetic fiber, its nucleus is being residing in the medulla, and its nucleus is known as the dorsal nucleus of the vagus nerve. So the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, the superior salivatory nucleus, the inferior salivatory nucleus, and the dorsal nucleus of the vagus nerves, they all are being activated by the parasympathetic division. So you know that in the sympathetic nervous system, we have discussed that we have the ganglia, and the ganglia which are in the sympathetic nervous system. We have two ganglia. One is known as the sympathetic chain ganglia, which is also known as the paravertebral ganglia, which is lying very near to the spinal cord, and the other ganglia is known as the prevertebral ganglia, which is lying near to the body organ. And similarly, in the case of the parasympathetic nervous system, we also have the ganglia. And in the parasympathetic nervous system, the ganglia are usually very small, and and they are also lying very near or within the body organs. And so therefore the parasympathetic ganglia are also being known as the terminal ganglia or the intramural ganglia. But we have the exception of four parasympathetic ganglia, and these four parasympathetic ganglia, which are not small or are not lying very near to the body organ, these four parasympathetic ganglia are the ciliary ganglia, the pterygopalatine ganglia, submandibular ganglia, and the optic ganglia. These four ganglia are being lying at the region of the head and the neck. Except these four ganglia, all the ganglia in the parasympathetic nervous system, all are very small and all are very lying near to the or within the body organs. So the oculomotor nerve, which is a cranial nerve 3 from the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, it forms synapse in the ciliary ganglion, and its postganglionic neuron will then innervate the smooth muscles of the eye, which are responsible for the pupillary constriction and the bulging of the lens. Similar, that one is the preganglionic oculomotor nerve, and that one is the postganglionic oculomotor nerve. Similarly, the facial nerve from the superior salivatory nucleus, it will form synapse and two ganglia. One ganglia is known as the pterygopalatine ganglia, and the postganglionic neurons from the pterygopalatine ganglia will then innervate the lacrimal glands, which is responsible for the tear production, and also some nasal glands which makes the nasal cavity moist. And the synapse, the facial nerve which forms the synapse in the another ganglia, which is the submandibular ganglia, its postganglionic neurons will innervate the sublingual and the submandibular glands, which are responsible for the saliva production. So the facial nerves from the superior salivatory nucleus will form synapse at the pterygopalatine ganglia and the submandibular ganglia, which are responsible for the lacrimal gland innervation, and the sublingual and the submandibular gland innervation. Similarly, the glossopharyngeal nerve from the inferior salivatory nucleus will form the synapse at the otic ganglion, and from the otic ganglion, the postganglionic neurons will innervate the parotid gland, and you know that the parotid gland is responsible for the saliva production, so it will produce the saliva. So you know that the saliva in the mouth is being produced by three glands. One is known as the sublingual, the other one is known as the submandibular, and the third one is the parotid gland. So the sublingual and the submandibular glands are getting innervated by the facial nerve, whereas the parotid gland is getting innervation by the glossopharyngeal nerve. So the parasympathetic activation will increase the saliva production. Or for the general rule, the parasympathetic division or the parasympathetic nervous system activation will always increase the mucus production, or will always increase the secretion in the body. So right now we are not talking about the function or the physiology of the parasympathetic nervous system. We are only talking about the anatomy of the parasympathetic nervous system. Whereas the vagus nerve, the big vagus nerve from the dorsal nucleus of the vagus nerve, it forms synapse in the ganglia which are lying very near to the target organ or within the body organ to which the vagus nerve is innervating. Contrary to these, the oculomotor nerve, the facial nerve, and the glossopharyngeal nerve, which are forming synapse in the very well-defined ganglia, the vagus nerve is not forming the synapse in these well-defined ganglia, whereas it is forming the synapse in the ganglia which are very near to the target organ, and these ganglia are very small. So the vagus nerve ganglia are also being known as the terminal ganglia or the intramural ganglia. And you know that the vagus nerve is a big vagus nerve, is the big vagus nerve with the parasympathetic fibers, and the big vagus nerve is supplies the organs of the head, the thorax, in the thorax we have the heart, we have the lungs, and in the abdomen, the stomach, and the pancreas, the liver, and in the large intestine. So the vagus nerve is supplying to many organs. So you can also see in this diagram that this is the brain stem of the brain, and you know that this is the cranial nerve 3 and from the Edinger Westphal nucleus, and the cranial nerve 3 from the Edinger Westphal nucleus, it is being forming synapse in the ciliary ganglion, and from the ciliary ganglion the postganglionic neurons will innervating the smooth muscles of the eye. Similarly, the cranial nerve 7, which is coming out from the superior salivatory nucleus, and the cranial nerve 7 will form the synapse at the two ganglia. One is known as the pterygopalatine ganglia, which is innervating the lacrimal gland and the mucous membranes of the nose and the palate. And the cranial nerve 7, which is forming the synapse in the another ganglia, which is the submandibular ganglia, from where the postganglionic neuron innervating the submaxillary gland or the submandibular gland or the sublingual gland, which is responsible for the saliva production. Similarly, the cranial nerve 9, which is the glossopharyngeal nerve, which is coming out from the inferior salivatory nucleus. The cranial nerve 9 is forming the synapse in the otic ganglia, and the postganglionic neurons from the optic ganglia will innervate the parotid gland, which is also responsible for the saliva production. And the cranial nerve 10, which is the vagus nerve, the big vagus nerve, which is coming out from the dorsal nucleus of the vagus. And you know that the cranial nerve is supplying many organs in our body, and you can see that the cranial nerve 10 is not forming synapse in any of these four well-defined ganglia, and the cranial nerve 10 vagus nerve ganglia are lying very near to the body organs. These are the ganglia which are lying very near to the organs to which it is innervating. So these ganglia are being known as the terminal ganglia or the intramural ganglia. So the vagus nerve ganglia are terminal ganglia or the intramural ganglia. So the vagus nerve is supplying the heart, the larynx, trachea, bronchi, esophagus, stomach, many organs. You can see the pancreas, adrenal gland, small intestine. So it is a big vagus nerve with the parasympathetic fibers. So how much you know that the vagus nerve is important, because it is controlling many organs in our body. So these the vagus nerves all have the parasympathetic fibers. So the parasympathetic nervous system is controlling all these organs by the vagus nerve. And this is all the cranial part. And you know that the parasympathetic division also has being the sacral part of the spinal cord, and the sacral region of the spinal cord from S2 to S4, it is being the parasympathetic division. And the sacral division of the parasympathetic is being controlling the kidney, the rectum, the bladder, gonads or external genitalia. So the sacral division of the parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for the micturition, defecation, whereas the cranial nerve is controlling all these functions. So therefore the parasympathetic division is also being said as the craniosacral division, because it is controlling by the cranial nerves and also by the sacral region of the spinal cord. So another thing which I want to tell you is that you know that before the ganglia we have the preganglionic neurons, and after the ganglia we have the postganglionic neuron. So in the case of the parasympathetic nervous system, you can see that the preganglionic neurons are long, whereas the postganglionic neurons are short. So you can also see in the case of the vagus nerve, the preganglionic neurons are very long, whereas the postganglionic neurons are very short. So in the case of the parasympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic neurons are long and the postganglionic neurons are short. Whereas in the case of the sympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic neurons are short and the postganglionic neurons are long. So there is a difference between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is being made by the thoracolumbar region of the spinal cord, whereas the parasympathetic nervous system is being made by the craniosacral region of the central nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system, we have the short preganglionic neurons and long postganglionic neurons, whereas in the case of the parasympathetic, the preganglionic neurons are long and the postganglionic neurons are short. And the ganglia in the sympathetic nervous system is being close to the spinal cord, and in the case of the parasympathetic nervous system, the ganglia is being very close or inside the visceral organ. So let's talk about the parasympathetic ganglia. I've told you that in the parasympathetic nervous system, mostly we have the small terminal ganglia, which are also set as the intramural ganglia, because they lie very near or within the organs they innervate, with the exception of the four the parasympathetic ganglia of the head and neck. And these four parasympathetic ganglia are the ciliary ganglia, submandibular ganglia, pterygopalatine ganglia, and the optic ganglia.